Yeah, so I just want to ask your forgiveness already, even though Christmas Eve is past. But
Guys, this is breaking news.
Christmas Eve, I'm putting out peanut M&Ms, holiday ones for the company. Okay, there's 40-something people that would enjoy those, and don't be yelling at me when I put them out because you're like, "Why do you buy those? I can't stop eating them." So like, I'm just telling you ahead of time, like it's holidays. And you're just going to have to practice this self-control.
Well, don't be yelling at me if our company gets very little to eat. Rock Solid Families wants to thank Maxwell Construction for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. For over 30 years, Maxwell Construction has been a leader in turning dreams into realities, building schools, banks, restaurants, and many other commercial and public facilities. Maxwell Construction has made it their priority to not just build buildings, but to build into their community. So if you have any construction needs, call them at 812-537-2200. Welcome to Rock Solid Families Podcast. This is Merle Hutchinson, being joined by my lovely wife, Linda. Linda, how are you? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
To you. I really like your wimpy looking festive season's greeting mug.
Not that we're recording this on Christmas. I just want you to know we are taking a break for our Christmas holiday, but we are posting this show on Christmas Day. So I had my Thanksgiving mug.
Was it Thanksgiving or was it a pumpkin thing?
No, it was like Grateful Hearts kind of thing, like thanks. Yeah. So I had to go switch out to, this one's really wimpy, you're right. It says Season's Greetings, but it was the fastest one I could find.
I thank God every day I'm not a woman.
Look, and I was like,
I got my big old Yeti.
And I was thinking, like we should have worn like red and green or something.
Oh my gosh. Guys, this is what we have to deal with. Yeah, I put about maybe a second and a half worth of thought into the coloring. But hey, that's why we're
I'm
different.
hoping that as we post this show, we are just having a blast with our kiddos running around and our grandkids. Like this year, it's a weird year. We actually have one coming in and one coming out. And I think there's like maybe 24 hours if we're lucky. Yeah. It's an overlap. So I'm going to grab onto anything I can.
So,
but
yeah.
But we're praying for you as you're listening to the show. If you're listening it on Christmas and you're spending it alone, God knows you and he sees you. And we just want to tell you that he loves you and he wants a relationship with you. So no matter how many people you have in your house or who you're getting together with on the holidays, there is a God who loves you. And he sent his one and only son, Jesus, to die for you and to come, as an unseen king or a very unusual king, right?
Definitely counterculture.
Yeah.
Especially as we think about Christmas, how true Christmas, if we were to celebrate it the way Christ would probably intend us to do, would be very counterculture.
Yes.
But we have definitely fallen into a secular world. And actually, that's going to kind of launch us into our topic today.
Yes.
Because, it is kind of interesting when your kids are young. So we got grandkids running around and stuff, and they can't wait for the gifts and the presents and the things like that. But as they do get older, that becomes less and less. And now, gosh, by the time you're your age and my age, we're like, oh, why'd you spend the money? Why'd you waste the money on that?
What was your favorite gift growing up? Like, do you have a favorite that stuck out to you?
I don't know about a favorite. I know this sounds weird, but you can kind of go back and you'll connect the dots out of this. I asked for a set of weights.
A set of weights.
A set of weights. And I got a set of weights when I was probably, I think, 5th or 6th grade. And before my parents even got up, I had those weights out and I was lifting them. And so that probably doesn't surprise you I got that at a very young age. So that was kind of fun. Hockey skates, those kinds of things were always fun.
Sports equipment.
Sports equipment, always, you could never go wrong with that.
Yeah.
I know this sounds weird, but we would all get like 2 pairs of jeans. And those would be the jeans that would last you for the entire year.
Yeah. We got socks and underwear every Christmas, socks and underwear.
How about you?
Well, it's funny because I don't really remember many gifts, which, mom and dad, like, obviously
Sorry,
it's too
Mom
late.
and Dad.
It's too late. But it's really the memories of what we did on Christmas, right? Like we always went to my grandma's on Christmas
Now you're
Eve.
making me sound really superficial.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I know. I asked you what gifts, right? But I don't have a lot of memory of the gifts, but I remember the events. And I remember Christmas Eve going to my grandma's and, just running around with my cousins. And then Christmas morning, Santa come in and just really feeling just the presence of family and laughter. And so I'm hoping that as you're listening to this show, that's what our house was. Because last night on Christmas Eve, again, we're pre-taping this, but right now we're up to 44 people for a sit-down turkey dinner. So I am going to be cooking turkeys all week up to this day to try to get to that place of I have enough turkey for everybody.
And my job this week is, 1, to not create any more work, but 2, to say, what can I do to help?
That's right.
What can I do to help?
That's right.
Because it won't come to me naturally.
No. And I will have a list. I'll have a list. So, but again, Merry Christmas to you. And whenever you're listening to the show, we know that people go back through our archives and listen. But we're hoping that as we talk about this show, we're talking about gifts that really do keep on giving and that are worth hanging on to and remembering. So, but before we do that, we want to thank our sponsors.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions and Maxwell Construction for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. So, guys, we appreciate that. We're coming into the new 2024 year, and our sponsors continue to want to hang in there with us. And I mean, to us, that's a big deal because they continue to support the type of messaging that we believe is important. So we want to thank those guys.
And as we enter into 2024, we are starting a new format for the Rock Solid Families podcast. We are being super intentional of just trying to figure out what our listeners want and need and what is working, what's not. And so we have gotten some outside counsel on just really what is the best format for this podcast. So you want to tell them a little bit about that?
Yeah. So right now our average show runs right around 37 minutes. And it's because
37 minutes.
30. Well, and it's funny because that's the natural average of where it goes. We do not put a time. We do not put a clock on us or anything. It's just kind of like, well, let's go through the topic and see where it comes out. And that's about where it comes out.
37 minutes.
Yep, that's where it comes out. And so we've thought about the idea of being more useful to you guys and kind of more practical and bang for the time buck. And so what we're going to do is we are going to take so many of the different topics that we've covered over these years, especially practical topics like how to do something better or different in your marriage or in your raising of kids or how you use your talents or whatever. And we're going to really hyper focus on that. And we're going to give you tools and skills and methods and talk about that for only like 15 minutes. Okay, so we're rolling into what we're calling Rock Solid Families podcast shorts.
That's versus long pants.
Yeah. And so these are going to be shorts where we're just going to try to get to it so that we know that some of you have a long commute out there. Most people listen while they're commuting or driving, but sometimes your commute's only 10 or 15 minutes and you leave this show hanging. And so hopefully this will allow you to get in, listen, grab something very useful, and then be done with that episode.
So our commute is less than 1 mile. So don't get a whole lot.
That's where we don't listen.
I don't get a lot of listens, but everywhere we go is 15 minutes, it seems like. So that's when I listen to all my podcasts. So yeah, but we are thankful for your listenership and your following. We have had folks who have listened to us from all over the world, and we don't take that for granted. We don't underestimate the time you've spent with us. And so thank you for listening. We have been on the air for 5 years and doing podcasts weekly for 5 years. And so we're not going anywhere, but we want to make them, like Merle said, little useful chunks that you can listen to and kind of get some takeaways, some go-tos for your marriage and your family.
Yeah, hopefully just being more practical.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's get into today's topic.
Are you saying the last 5 years we weren't very practical?
Well, what we, something that is interesting is we discussed a lot of topics.
Yeah.
And so we have discussed family dynamics, and we've given stories and a lot of supportive information. And so some of that stuff is going to be more as a backdrop, and we're going to get right to what we have gleaned out of all of the work that we've done over the years and get right to, hey, here's what you can take from that.
Yeah.
So
if you want the stories, you got to go back.
You got to go back. No, I would not say that we would, never bring in the stories.
Yeah, we'll bring stories in, but we just got to do it quick stories.
Yeah.
So today we're joining two ideas together. We are taking the idea about gifts and whatever you have under the tree this Christmas, and as well as the approaching new year, but we're spinning the gifts idea a little differently. We're not talking about the things that you wrapped or put in a gift bag.
Mm-hmm. I just finished reading up the book of Ecclesiastes. And when you read through that book, Solomon is just talking there, and he's the wisest man that ever lived. And he's repeating the statement, everything is meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And he talks frequently about all of his accomplishments, all of the material things that he has acquired and built for himself. And he kind of always ends it with, and this too is meaningless, And so, he boils that whole book down to the idea of, to love God, right? To love God. And so when we talk about the gifts, we've talked about this before in shows on the idea that we get our kids games and toys and stuff, and it's a really hot thing for all of about 24 hours. And then it's off in a closet somewhere or broken. And so the idea of coming into this season and moving into 2024, we really wanted to talk about the gifts that are a little bit different. And one way you can tell they're different is they're really hard to measure by normal metrics. Like you don't buy them, you can't measure the size or quantity. And that actually is why it is such an important gift.
Yeah. So regardless of what you had under the tree or what you gave away this Christmas, this show is for you, because this doesn't cost any money and you don't have to go to a store, praise God, for these gifts. So we're talking about gifts that are specifically talked by the Apostle Paul in the book of Galatians. And Galatians chapter 5, really does kind of boil it down to what is God asking of us? Like, what does he want us to share and to spread and to have in our lives and give away as gifts? And so, as a children's minister, I got to teach little ones. I was teaching little ones this past week of kindergarten and first graders. They are adorable. But we were talking about the good news. We were talking about the good news of Jesus, and the word gospel means good news. And so we were talking about the gifts that God has given us through his son, Jesus. And so, I used to teach him a little song. I won't sing it for you because you will.
Oh, thank you.
But it's all about the fruit of the Spirit, and it's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so we used to sing that song so that would get into their mind, not just in their mind, but come down to their heart, right? Like, this is what God is asking of us. This is what we can give to other people that doesn't cost us a dime, but it costs us a lot as far as the work that we're to do.
Man, I just think it's so important because so many of these things that we're going to talk about, these fruits of the Spirit, and we've done entire shows on the fruits of the Spirit, but it's the idea you're coming into the start of the new year. And these sort of gifts you have to be intentional about. And maybe some of these are not that difficult for you. Maybe you are naturally kind of a polite, gentle, kind person, but maybe you struggle with patience or something like that, okay? And so the idea that you can start to, I'm just going to give people the better version of me. And the better version of me is going to be, that's what it boils down to. The fruits of the Spirit are the better versions of you, okay? Yeah. And so, what would it look like? What would it look like if you practiced on a daily basis and people around you practiced the fruits of the Spirit? And, some things that I think you would notice quickly is you would see just general politeness and manners. just the idea that somebody would wave you to go in front of you rather.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that reminds me of my car wreck. Yeah.
Oh man, you need to tell him that story because
Well, the guy was being nice.
Oh, honey, it's the first time you've had a car accident that was your fault.
Oh, you had to say that, didn't you?
Well,
had
I mean,
to say that.
you got cited, you got a ticket for it. So,
well, a guy was being nice. So I was in traffic, and there was oncoming traffic coming the other way, and we were both kind of stopped. Right, there's a big line of traffic going both east and west. And the guy opposing me was in a big old white truck, and he saw that I was just standing still, and I had my turn signal on to go into a store parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw that I wanted to go in there, and so he stopped, and he gave me a gap to go,
Mm-hmm.
just like a little turning lane.
Yeah.
And then he waved me on. He was just trying to be nice.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this will be great because otherwise I'm going to sit here in this traffic forever. And I start to nudge through, but I couldn't see around him because he was a bigger truck. So I just tried to nudge my truck out in front.
Oh.
And as I'm trying to nudge out, I can't see. And I'm just like hoping. And I nudge out, and I no sooner got my front end out, and here comes this car. Just bam.
This woman was.
I felt bad for her.
What a way to ruin her day.
Yeah. So anyway, there was. I will tell you this. She was extremely polite.
Mm-hmm.
I worked on being very polite. There was no hostility. There was no anger. There was no blaming. I quickly came out and said, that was my bad, and so that whole idea was just something like, well, this situation stinks, but there could be a better way to handle it.
Yeah. And then your truck wasn't drivable. So God loved a friend of ours who let you borrow his other spare truck. And so, that's what we're talking about. Just being generous and just being kind and being patient and having self-control, even in the middle of a car accident, or, being, generous, those are all different things. But like I said, the fruit of the Spirit, which one is hardest for you, hon? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, or self-control? Which one's hardest for you?
Two of them.
You got two?
Two. Self-control and patience.
Oh, you can't take those. Those are mine.
Oh. Well, the patient, generally though, I'll say generally I'm a pretty patient person. I don't really,
yes, you are.
I don't get too uptight about it. But when I want something, then I start to chomp at the bit for it. And that's where the self-control part comes in. Because now I don't have a big problem with self-control with like emotions and that, but I do have self-control issues like with impulsiveness type things of delving into things I shouldn't.
Yeah, so I just want to ask your forgiveness already, even though Christmas Eve is past. But
guys, this is breaking news.
Christmas Eve, I'm putting out peanut M&Ms, holiday ones, for the company, okay? There's 40-something people that would enjoy those. And don't be yelling at me when I put them out, because you're like, why do you buy those? I can't stop eating them. So like, I'm just telling you ahead of time, like it's holidays. And you're just going to have to practice this self-control.
Well, don't be yelling at me if our company gets very little to eat.
Yeah. So, we can intentionally this holiday season and all the new year be intentional about giving these gifts to other people, whether it about bringing joy to somebody, maybe in the midst of grief. We have a family member who lost their mom. And so we grieve with her. We grieve with the family and the loss of them. And so, try to bring that joy, bringing that kindness. What can we do to help? We want to love on them so that their grief is hopefully diminished a bit.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit, Hun, about, how can we actually be intentional about 2024 is coming, like building better and new habits, because it really is about habits. It really is about what I like to refer to as we have our hard wiring and our soft wiring. And that hard wiring is stuff that is born and baked into us. It's our DNA, and we're not going to change it.
You mean our selfish nature?
Our selfish nature, but being our personality, our right-handedness, like all of these different things are baked into you. You're not changing them very easily anytime soon. But we have a lot of things that are what I like to think of as our soft wiring that are really just practice behaviors. Well, this is how I grew up. Well, this is the routine that I've always done. And it becomes so frequently practiced that we're kind of convinced that this is the way it is.
Yeah.
Okay?
I've actually had clients who've told me like, I'm just an angry person. That's how God made me. I'm like, I'm just not going to forgive him. God's going to have to deal with that. I'm like, So like they kind of dig their heels in like this, there's nothing that can change here. And it's really not a can't, it's a won't.
Yeah. They accept a brokenness in them that really is a brokenness that probably is not benefiting them or the other people. And so how do we build the fruits back in a little bit better? And so, being intentional about some of this. Here's some things, guys, that coming into 2024. How about this? How about ask people how they're doing and then listen to the response, right? Just the idea that when you do greet somebody that you say, hey, how are you doing? And then stop and just take that second to listen. I mean, that's an easy habit. And we actually, as parents, should be training our kids to ask how other people are doing.
Sometimes blows their minds if you really want to know. Because sometimes people will ask it on like literally in passing and they don't even wait for an answer. And so if you would literally stop and like at the store, maybe you run into somebody or, at school and you literally want to know. The problem is that we've gotten so busy. And I've done this. I'm guilty of being in like Kroger's and like, I don't want to make eye contact with anybody because I don't have time. Right.
Yeah.
But that's what we need to slow down and spend that time to really engage with people.
Yeah. Unless asked, talk less about yourself. If you've noticed that you tend to hog the airspace when you're talking, whether you're hanging with friends, whether you're with family, and not that you have a word counter on your hip counting your words like you might count steps, but if you notice that you put out a whole lot more words, you might want to think about what those words are about. Do you find yourself sharing your stories a lot, your stuff? And just the idea, not that all of that is evil and bad, but it does speak to the idea of the need to have to share your world with everybody. And if you're sharing your world, that means they're not able to really share theirs. And so two people really can't talk at the same time. So stop talking so much about yourself and ask about others. And there's, if they ask about how you or your family is doing, fine, share it, but keep it to the minimum.
Yeah. And making that eye contact with people, like I mentioned before, is so important to look at those people. And here's a question, and you kind of asked it, you're going to say you're going to ask it at Christmas time. How can I help? So if somebody is like, oh my gosh, I'm running late, or, oh man, I forgot this. Like, how can I help you?
Yeah.
To offer to help somebody is huge, and to really mean it. Like, don't ask it if you don't mean it. And so we're really trying to engage people to give those gifts of the fruit of the Spirit that we are kind of just ignoring and really not paying attention to anymore.
Yeah. Also, something that we can do to be a better version of ourselves. And this is a little bit, it'll appear as being kind of self-motivated, it's like it's a selfish thing, but actually doing a better job of taking care of yourself so that you can be a better vehicle to serve others. I mean, especially if you are a middle-aged person and older and you're finding your energy is starting to wane, or maybe you've got some problems with aches and pains or whatever, it's like, take better care of yourself. The more that people have to tend to you, there's a place for that. But if more people have to serve you than you can serve others, it's at least worth thinking about, okay? I don't want anybody to feel guilty if they need help. That's not the issue at all. But the idea that if you have the tools within your body, but you just don't, you have a lot of headaches, you feel overweight, you don't have good energy, these are things that you may want to consider taking a different approach to.
Yeah. Going back to looking people in the eye and asking them how they're doing, really notice not just what they say, but how they say it, and notice and try to engage with them and say, wow, it sounds like, if I said, hey, how was your day? And you're like, it was okay. Wow, you say it's okay, but it doesn't sound like it's okay. So and this is huge in our marriage, in our family, when our kids come home from school, we ask that classic question, how was your day? And, kids Okay, and so try to engage with them more to find out like what was it about their day? What was a
Mhm.
high? Ask them a high or a low. And sometimes they'll give you things that they wouldn't have done just with that classic question, right? But how can I help? What's going on? Help me understand, just engaging with them how they're doing.
Yeah. And a neat one that I kind of think about is allowing everybody has to feel validated to some level and valued.
Mhm.
And sometimes we are constantly, maybe because we are busy and we want to take charge and we want to get things done. We do this with our kids. We might do it with people at work. But the idea of you just back off and allow other people's ideas to come to the top, allow other people to do certain things.
Mm.
And so the idea that you just don't have to do something. And in fact, when somebody else suggests it, even though you might have that bubbling idea in your mind that you go, you know what? Yeah, let's roll with it. Let's
Yeah.
roll with it right away. As soon as you do that, somebody especially who's not used to getting that, you have just lifted them up, right?
Yeah. So, part about being intentional of giving these gifts is really putting it into our calendar, scheduling it and taking the time. For instance, my dad is in town, and if he's listening, hi dad, but Merry Christmas. But he's gone months and months out of the year. And so when he's in town, I want to be intentional about spending time with him and, putting up his tree or having dinner together. And so, put that on the calendar and protect it, whether it be a double date with some friends or, getting together with your grandparents. So please, spouse, putting date night on the calendar so that you and I stay connected and stay healthy. These are all ways to give that gift, being intentional, that doesn't cost you a dime.
Yeah, it's so easy to put a lot of stuff on the calendar. But when we talk about the people that we really want to care about, we've talked about the hierarchy of relationships with God, spouse, kids and family, and then everything else, and how all the everything else can quickly come
Yeah.
over top of God, spouse, and family. And so the idea that, like you said, being intentional about saying, no, once a week or twice a month or whatever, we're going to make sure that we do get out for a date of some sorts with our spouse, and just even some personal training or something where you're actually doing something to maybe go on a retreat and get reconnected with your faith and get revitalized. These are things that will go a long way in this upcoming year.
I want to piggyback on your priority list. I keep saying I'm going to get this typed up and put it on our wall because I'm always going like this. But one of the greatest things that we do at Rock Solid Families is help families reprioritize their focus and their family and in their home. And so it's a lot of times it's been out of whack. It's been out of line or misprioritized. And so we want God to be the front, the center, the lead, the number one priority in your marriage. Doesn't mean that you spend all day on your knees, but it means that God is the primary focus of your home, and then your spouse, and then your kids. You keep saying family, but
Right.
like kids, in your own home, your parents, your siblings, your friends, your work, all those, your neighbors, those are all below those top three. And man, if you can prioritize those things, you are going to be giving the gifts of the fruit of the Spirit because God is going to be number one, and it's going to trickle down into the things that follow.
Yeah, not only giving that, but then also teaching the people in your house that, right?
Yes.
Because your
Show
kids
your
have to
kids.
understand it, because sometimes if it's out of order, and frequently we see kids at the
Yes.
top of that
Yeah.
is something that's out of order. And to teach your kids that and why we do that is
Yeah.
a big thing. So in 2024.
Honestly, I feel like this is a little tangent, but that I believe is causing such an entitlement and enabling in our Gen Zs, because we have elevated, like you said, the child to create this child-centered home where they are calling all the shots and
Right.
they're number one on everybody's list. And so priorities, and they feel it, they know it. And man, that is just such a very unhealthy dynamic. Give your child the greatest gift by showing them these fruit of the Spirit, but also prioritizing those things that we described: God, spouse, child.
All right, I'm going to bring in my little metaphor.
Uh-oh, what's that?
As a man,
As a man whose truck's in the shop?
that has no vehicle right now. got me thinking a lot about vehicles.
Oh goodness, I see a different one coming soon.
Do we have to have the fruits of the Spirit, or do we have to have all of them? And maybe the answer to that in our day-to-day life, the quick answer might be, no, not really. I guess we could stumble through that. I guess I could be an old grouch and all of that. But I kind of do think of the fruits of the Spirit as being like the oil to the engine. I mean, the engine has to have a lubricant to reduce friction. To reduce that friction. And if I'm running low on oil or the oil is old, the engine's still going to try to run, but it's going to create more heat. It's going to create more damage. It's going to be very abrasive within that engine. And so the same thing goes, like the fruits of the Spirit are just like a lubricant in relationships where it reduces friction. It reduces the friction so I don't have to wonder whether I just upset somebody or somebody's upsetting me. And so the fruits of the Spirit, are they absolutely essential? No, we have a choice. We can say, no, I don't really want those. And then we can live by the fruits of the flesh, right? And so and earlier in Galatians, Paul talks about what that looks like. And so there's lots of friction that comes out of this. And so the fruits of the Spirit, think of them as, if you want things to go smooth in 2024, then add this lubrication of the fruits to your relationships.
I love that, hon. That's a really good
metaphor. When you don't have a car and you're sitting around a lot, you got time to think.
I was actually thinking about that this morning. I didn't think of oil and engine, but I was thinking as I was walking through our church this week, and I was noticing that it was after service and like nobody was leaving. And it was just laughter and kids running around and people talking and just sharing and people helping each other to the car. And it was just like, that is the fruit, that is the oil, that is the in the engine of the church, which, by the way, the church is the people, the body of Christ. But when you have the fruit of the Spirit in there, and they're kind and they're loving and they're joy-filled and they're patient with people, it just works well.
Yeah, it's
and
smooth.
Man, I just thought that just filled my heart.
Yeah,
this is the heaven on earth of what the body of Christ looks like when it's working right.
Yeah. So guys, let's close out. Hopefully you have enjoyed your Christmas day and the week in between Christmas and New Year's, and you do have an opportunity, to really figure out maybe not so much all these great New Year's resolutions and all of that, but just the idea of how can I make relationships that I call important? How can I make them better? How can I make them smoother? And we would say that the greatest fruit that you can give is from Christ, and that is the fruits of the Spirit. And so just pick them out, right? Pick them out. And how can I start to put these into these relationships?
Okay. So I was thinking, as you're talking about fruit, I was thinking of, it is Christmas Day and the whole idea of fruitcake. My grandma
she used to get me that stuff. And I'm one of those rare guys. I can eat fruitcake.
I know. And I remember it being sitting there and I'm like, this looks disgusting, But then she would always get the kind that was made by the nuns. It was like
by the monks.
By the monks. And it was like saturated in what, like bourbon or something?
Man. Yeah.
So maybe you're having fruitcake this Christmas, but let's go to a different kind of fruit. And
those things weigh about 30 pounds a piece.
And they cost a fortune.
Yeah.
They're not cheap. So anyway, we hope that this has been enjoyable whenever you're listening to it. We hope that you will take away and really be intentional about giving gifts that will last forever, because it's not going to be what's under the tree or what's wrapped in the toy box. It's going to be what we give to one another in relationships.
All right. So thanks again for listening to Rock Solid Families podcast, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great Christmas Day. Rock Solid Families wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. Casey's has grown to be one of the largest and most unique garden centers and gift shops in the Cincinnati tri-state area. Whether you are looking to take on that next landscape project or simply add a little home decor to your house, Casey's has you covered. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Call them today at 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.